Pray with us. Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather here this evening. Thank you for the rain. We ask that you protect and watch over us, watch over our families as we leave some of them at home. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anything that y'all would like to add or change from the short agenda? We'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as printed.
I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda as is.
Thank you, sir. Second? I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. Very good. All right. Appearance and public comment. Are you ready? Anything? All right. Next is consideration of the amendment to the 2022 budget. This is a hearing, so we'll open that up for public comment on this public hearing as we're looking to amend our 2022 budget for our audit. Is anyone here to speak on the amendment?
Is this the final reading?
Yes, sir, it is. Would the council like to speak on this? Amendment of the budget will hereby close the public hearing, and we will move for consideration of a vote. Council, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to amend the 2022 budget.
Thank you, sir. A second? Thank you. All those in favor? Very good. All right. Next is consideration of the zoning ordinance proposal. This is a proposal that we've had two quotes on looking over our current zoning. For our current zoning. I think that our zoning maps, our codes, our applications of how we go through those processes are important. I think it's what protects our city, and that's our job to protect the city. I understand the cost of this is sizable. But I do feel the importance of this because it will be something that will hold and work with us over the next 10 to 15 years before the need to be modified. Mark, do you have anything you want to add on?
I just made some comments, some bullet points, if I may. It will allow the city to better control development and growth in a way that fits with the city's desired character. It will remove gray areas that have to be renegotiated and brought back to council time after time. It will allow the city to protect itself by codifying requirements that are not in place. It will streamline the application process. It will help the city staff make sure they have all required documentation to approve the applications. If the standards are similar to other municipalities in the area, it will likely raise the level of a developer who is interested in developing within Demorest. It will allow for a standardization of materials installed so that infrastructure can easier for our city staff to be able to work on the same items that's being installed because of the requirements. It will allow the city to manage growth in a responsible fashion, and this is the burden of local government. It will allow the city to be a well-managed government, and that will provide us rules, regulations, and expectations. Having these three items, being rules, regulations, and expectations, will make it so that everyone has the same order of go on their projects. Same forms, same materials, same streets, water and sewer lines. Will allow the city to enforce the quality of each project, to have the process for the standards which will give consistency and quality to any development that is looking to come to Demorest. It will allow the city to have the consistency and quality which will be applied to each project and to the next project, and it will begin to be a community where people want to reside, play, and work. It will allow the city to grow responsibly and blossom into the new vision for Demorest. It will allow the city to adopt new standards and requirements that mean that they must be enforced and followed by everyone. All the possible code updates will require change. And this is the part where people have different ways of dealing with change when it affects their property. So as stated, the change of growth is coming to Habersham County as a whole. Mayor and council must make the tough decisions to manage the growth in a responsible fashion. That is the burden you must face today on the land use plan. But it also brings opportunity for you as a leader in the community. This opportunity can be handled properly and will shape the character and the vision for the city of Demorest for many years to come in the future. For these reasons above is why I've given you the two proposals to update the land use plan.
Thanks for that.
So, I understand the need for this. My question is, so this is $40,000, unbudgeted at this point. What is the rush to do it now versus, say, try to put it into the budget for next year? I mean, if we do not approve this, so in other words, what are we looking at if we don't approve this right now? We put it in the budget for next year, and then we do it next year versus now.
That's a great question. I think that we're probably being a little bit proactive as far as getting work on this, since this will, how long will this take for them to get it back?
4 to 6 months.
Right. I'm open to being convinced also to echo Councilman Allen's opinion. That is it's a beneficial expenditure, but it's $42,000 to $40,000, and that's a large expense without a pressing need at the moment. Because last time we were here, we asked Mark about it. We had a list of people that were coming, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we wanted to give them all the same thing with information. We don't have a list as such. And we also just had a comprehensive plan that came out with all the people that voted on that. And when we look at that, Demorest was next to last as far as development. And the main consensus is the one that I share the view of is, and as Mark stated in his comments there, that we want to maintain our character in our community. Because the reason people came to work for that reason, to move here. And so I agree, but it's not that we don't have any ordinances, and they did work in the past. They might have been a little clunky, but we did have a development that wanted to come in, and the citizens spoke, and the final resolution was that it didn't merge together. So there is opportunity for our citizens to put their input in. And I agree that it's a large amount of money, particularly when our accountant, Allen, advised that we should only take $800,000 out of our water department. And we agreed to $900,000, and we ended up with over $1 million. So, and we also look at the fact that our sewage is underwater, so we're going to have to raise that. So there's a lot of unknowns there, and this is not a concrete proposal like we need to get it done by 6 months. The other factor in my mind is the fact that we're using our own engineering firm. So we can always call them and they say 4 to 6 months. They're basically on standby for us. So if we see we needed a pressing rush, we could push it forward. But at this moment, I echo the comment that consider it in the budget or talk about it at a later date. But that would be the feeling that I would have, because $40,000 is 5% of the $800,000. That means, we can only do that 20 times. And so if we can only do it 20 times, is this 40,000 weighted that type of need and expense? So for my view, that at this moment, it's just a little bit of a cart before the horse with
Well-
that amount of money.
I really appreciate your thought into that, and, in my view, when I look at some of the ordinances that we have in place and look at some of the growth that's pushing up our way at a rapid pace, that what, in my opinion, is gonna happen is that we're gonna get caught and realize that there's problems with our zoning when it's too late. And that's when I look at it and say, well, that $40,000 is money well spent. Because when these developers come in and buy a piece of property and follow our zoning by the letter, and by the law, and it's not what we want, then that's when we'll regret it.
Yes, but there's also the fact that money is money, and when it's spent, there's a benefit for it. So when we spend money on the gymnasium, we see that floor is better, people are playing in it, the community sees it, and it's very beneficial. In this case, that money is kind of like a cloud out there. It's coming, but as we said previously, it didn't ever really materialize in the last comprehensive plan.
That's right.
It did not.
All this is a seatbelt or an airbag in your car. We hope that we'll never use it, but it's there to protect us. And that's what I see on some of these, zoning ordinances and updating some of our maps. Mark?
Right. I'd also like to make the comment that, if there's a DIY attitude, and the DIY attitude is where we can do it ourselves to a degree and we can save a large amount of money. We were able to DIY our park. If we contracted that out, it's $750,000. But our DIY save us $500,000. We have some ordinances. We have an attorney, and if we need to tweak those a little between now and then we have an ability to do that also. So to rush in and to always contract something out at an expenditure, to me, is we have to be good stewards of all our citizens' money that come to us. And to send everything out all the time, as opposed to doing everything we can to raise money, to have grants, to do it ourselves where we can, I'm not convinced that that is the best use of the funds. And in this case, again, we have rules, we have regulations that have been placed, they've worked before, and we don't know for a fact that they don't work, because they did work before on this council when these people came to us. So I'm not saying it wouldn't be better, or maybe it'd be easier, but at this time, that amount of money for what we get for it is, in my view, not the time to put it forward.
Oh, just that one property specifically that come to us looking for the apartment building. Under our current zoning, they could move forward without having to come to council on a whole assortment of projects that would disrupt the community, would disrupt the area in that area. And I think that's the first time that my eyes were kind of open to that, and worried about what that's gonna look like in a few years when somebody takes advantage of that.
Well, as I said, my view was that it wasn't a beneficial expenditure. It's just like, is it needed right at the moment? In other words, if you have two good new cars, do we need to go out and buy a third at $40,000? So until we budget and we figure out what amount of money we're going to take from the water department, what the rates are going to be for the sewage, and how much money we're going to put back in the park, we already had to take an extra $128,000 just to balance our budget for last year. We didn't take $80,000 that was supposed to be spent in the park, wasn't there. So if that had been spent in the park, it would have been $200,000 that we had to take. So that's another $200,000. So now we have $40,000 here. So when we look at that, that's another fifth that's just out there. So in my view, again, it's not that it's as I said earlier, it's not that it's not, important, wouldn't be needed, wouldn't be better. It's just that the pressing need. It's hard for me to visualize the pressing need when we haven't taken up the budget yet.
Mhm.
When the budget's out there, we see the money, we put a line item for it if we feel it's needed. When we look at everything else, how much are we gonna have to raise the rates on the sewage? That's my thought, so.
That's fair enough, and I completely understand that. That's one of our parts of being up here is to protecting the city budget, but it's also to protect the city and the citizens. And that's where it kind of comes down hard, whether or not you do make those cuts. And if we hire one of these firms now, we pay them at the end or pay them halfway?
Pay them as you go, percentage of completion.
So it would be completed by the end of the year. And that's my only concern is when I look at this is what is coming.
And my thoughts are, I mean, we all know that growth's coming to Habersham. We also know what happens when, people take advantage of loose or not well worded, legislation, whatever, from the local government. We look at our county level government and how many people have come in and stood and pled with them about people coming in and building, apartments and building this and that, right there and gonna clog up their streets. How many times have we seen, citizens of our greater community, that have said, what's gonna protect us from this? I mean, I bought a house, 5 years ago, and now there's gonna be an apartment complex right beside it when I thought this was a subdivision, and, that, to me, tells the tale of where we are as a larger community. We are people that build those things, they're not really concerned about clogging up your road. They have different concerns. They're business people. And, but if you live there, then you have concerns about that. That's, and to hear the people when they talk about what could be parked right next to them or behind them or across the road from them, you have to listen to that. And if somebody were to try to slip in here and take advantage of our loose, or antiquated, things, then, my worry would be is that we wouldn't be able to get in ahead of it in time to divert it.
Well,
Because it would be well within their legal.
Right, well, my thought on that is that it's really also good to be able to come to council because the last learning experience with growth into the city was what kind of effect will it have on our infrastructure? This $1 million that we've taken out of the water department every year did not go back into the infrastructure. And each mile that it takes for us to replace those 486 miles of water pipe we got in the ground went from $30,000 a mile to $125,000 a mile. So if we've not taken $1 million out every year and we would have put that back into our infrastructure, would we be better off? And our interest rate goes up. We have to pay these bills till 2038, and the interest goes up on it. So if we've taken more money and paid them down on our bonds and invested in our infrastructure, then these are tangible things. These are real things. The other point being that when we talk about this growth, how does it affect our infrastructure, our water, our sewage? As an example, maybe the growth, if it depletes all our ability to have any reserve, then all of a sudden we've got to go out and have a new sewage plant, or we've got to go out and pay a much higher rate when we go above that 175 for 1.75 million gallons per day.
And what
So that rate
protects us
goes
from that?
straight up.
What protects us from that?
Just like the last time they come in front of the council, and we have our attorney, we have our own ordinances, and if we're not for that and we want more protection, then we can work with him. In other words, why do we have to spend $40,000 at first to go out and get somebody else to bring all this for us? Why can't we do it DIY, as I said earlier, just like our park, get to a position, and then if we're not comfortable and we need it more, then that's fine. But why do we need to rush in right now and spend this money when we have so many unknowns out there, and we don't have some 200 apartment complex? We don't have a list of 5 of them, because Mark, we asked him last week, has anybody called?
But, with that one apartment complex, they were not allowed to put that density under our current zoning. But, under our current zoning, they are allowed to build a massive gas station, they're allowed to build a restaurant, they're allowed to build, a public restroom.
Well,
And without coming in front of the council, they could just get started on it.
Well-
That's what scares me.
right, that's what scares you here today, but I'm sure we could speak with him and say, ask him to look at our ordinances, and can we tweak that, and how can we do that, and let him bring some suggestions before us, and I'm sure it won't be $40,000.
No, but it would cost $3,000 or $4,000 to tweak a couple of pages.
Well, if that's a major concern, and that's what's needed, but what concerns me with the suggestion here is also the fact that when we put these other qualifications out there, I haven't heard any suggestion or can't read anything about how what it says affects our infrastructure, with the point I tried to make earlier. In other words, is there gonna be, how much is that gonna draw on our sewage? How much is that gonna draw on our water? If we bring 2 developments in, all of a sudden, oh dear, we have to have 2.5 billion gallons.
And that's right, and that's what the new, zoning would be able to moderate.
But zoning is not, zoning are words. Zoning is not infrastructure and sewage.
But zoning would be able to design around our infrastructure.
So there'll be specific recommendations as to who can build and how many.
Of the density, absolutely, yeah.
John, if I can,
Sure.
we do have one that we've talked about in the past that is 75 acres, that's outside the city limits, but it is contiguous. And they want 4 units to the acre. So that's roughly 11,500 square foot lots. And so that's 300 houses. And with that infrastructure there, this is gonna show whether if we want to sell them our infrastructure, but keep them in the county, they don't annex in, because if I got 300 houses to pick up garbage,
Right.
that's an issue. If I've got 300 new homes with brand new water and sewer lines that were built to our standards, that comes from our folks, that's another future need there. The police officers, how many does the chief need to cover 1,400 new people that live in those 300 homes? So there is a way when folks are not located in the city, you can say, look, we'll sell you our outside water rates and sewer rates, you stay out there, you don't affect our infrastructure. You can handle that when they're not in the city. But I think part of what Jerry's saying too, if it's, just take a 6-acre tract down the road,
Right.
somebody can come in and want to do 100 townhomes.
Right. So,
And that's where it affects,
Right.
and that's where it affects the infrastructure, where you, what I think what you're trying to say.
right, and also the fact is, the expression though, when they're outside, they're under the county, they're under the police force, the sheriff's
Correct,
department.
outside.
And the sheriff's department go anywhere.
That's right.
And, the city anywhere, so they're, they can take care of that. But I don't understand, as I said, why we can't just simply put some exclusion in the ordinances that we have, which says that whatever development you have must come in front of council and be assessed for the infrastructure to the city effect that it will have. So that we can't have such a large infrastructure that it puts us into a poor situation. So that one sentence would keep us from being out of trouble, keep us out of trouble. Because we could come and say, no, our ordinance says you can do it, but our ordinance says you cannot do it if you do something against our infrastructure. So let Thomas work on that one sentence, and then work through our budget, and we can have this discussion into our budget for next year for $40,000, we can put it in there. But if we put it in there right now, it wasn't budgeted for last year. It's not in,
Can we, as a compromise, can we table this until the August 1st meeting, and that way we'll have our attorney here and can give us advice what to do with that, and we can make a decision whether we want to proceed, delay, look at the budget for next year.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I do have some questions over, what kind of door that would open up for the council as far as all those coming in front of the council, so I would like to ask Thomas about that. So that's fair enough, John.
Because one of the issues, when I read the moderate, medium, and heavy, intensities, and I'm like, okay, what does this mean when it says you can only have 50% of coverage? Because there's nothing that tells me what our minimum lot size is.
Yeah.
I mean, that statement there says, okay, does that mean the 50% is the house, the street, the sidewalks is 50% covered? Because if they've got 100 acres, are you telling me they can only develop 50 acres? Or what's going on with the other 50%? All that leads to one of the items that I stated in here. That's what I was playing off of with that thought was, because there's so much interpretation that everybody will interpret it different. If we have the rules and regulations, everybody has to follow the same rules, because it's about the design standards. The streets are X, Y, wide, the sidewalks are this, water and sewer development standards for the city of Demorest or this. It gives all of that, because right now, if somebody came, I'm kind of like,
Appreciate your insight and development background, because you're looking for the loopholes.
Yeah.
In this,
Yeah.
and that's what we need to
Yeah.
know.
right.
The one thing I'm worried about is approving everyone that comes in front of us, but what if we approve one and then turn down another, and then it opens us up for litigation over why we turned them down?
Well, there'd be a reason, there's a council, and I don't think we would turn anybody down if there wasn't a very legitimate reason.
Well, I guess it depends on how many people show up standing here in line. That sometimes sways things too.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to table, pick it up August 1st meeting at that point.
Okay, very good. All those in favor to table?
I would like to make a comment if I could.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
That's okay. I hear Mark saying growth is coming and it needs to be managed responsibly. My question is, what does that mean? Is responsible to Mark mean, well, we need jobs, we need big buildings, then we gotta provide housing, is that what does responsible mean?
So responsible, that's a great question, and that's part of the comprehensive plan on planning for the city, and part of some of the input that's gonna be met with some of these engineers as they ask what's important to us. Is 25 doors per acre appropriate for us?
Right.
And the answer is no.
No.
and
Is the density that's defined in our current handbook that could be risen in multiple levels now appropriate? No, it is not. I appreciate the motion. Second, the table. All those in favor to table until next month. Thank you.
and I will get with Thomas starting in the morning to start this conversation, so that we can have a plan.
And I would like to, get deeper into this subject, and I fully understand, because, as we went to fish the other day, we drove the back roads, and you went through small town after small town. Some were beautiful, some looked like a great place to live, and some had been mismanaged, and they were absolute dumps, and there were trashy buildings, and the buildings that were there were treated trashy and everything, and I thought of our town and how much pride we take in our town. And I thought, there's no way while I'm sitting on that council that I want my town to reflect what's going on in this town. And then the very next one, 2 miles up the road, stellar, beautiful, looked like it had been on a postcard. So, we are in the time in our town where we are choosing which one of those towns we want to be. And we do need to get out in front of it, but I definitely know that we're capable of doing that. And, I do want to get deeper into my knowledge of that kind of thing.
If you take the Great Depression, where subdivisions became sewer pipe subdivisions where they were stopped, the builder developers bought those from the banks for pennies on the dollar. And my job before was to find those that were partially developed to finish. And the design standards in some of the smaller cities, because they weren't prepared for what happened. And then that's when you can just go in there and say, okay, I've read your ordinances, it really can't stop me, this is what I really can do. Because they didn't get final plat, or there wasn't a bond on the streets, and the final paving was not done. Those are still out there. Not many left in Georgia, but in the smaller cities, there are. And that was the biggest mess for a lot of cities, was those dumped subdivisions. And that's where a lot of cities got hurt, because they may have done something in their ordinance or signed off on something because it was just to get it going. I understand everything every one of y'all have said on this. I understand the budget questions. This was brought up, obviously, I wasn't here for the budget process for where we are now, but these are just one of those items that I knew that we needed in doing my research and looking at what do we need to do to step up, to protect ourselves. Now, because again, Sweetgrass would have been the last one that was developed, and that was 05, 04, right before the Great Depression.
Yeah.
So obviously that kind of growth hasn't come and hit yet. And I think we just have to be prepared, because we do have this one company, that is a very large company, who wants to annex. But we've got a moratorium, and it doesn't expire until October 12th. So we've got some more times to deal on that.
When you look at the tax overlay of our city, there are still multiple tracks throughout our city that is larger, that could open up for some of these developers and some of these subdivisions, and those are the ones that scare me.
You know, there's 50 lots, Habershed Meadows back there, that are vacant lots. So somebody could, those are platted out there.
57.
And so those are just a few things that could hit on a production builder side.
And also with the conversation with Thomas about the way to prevent that, because it might not come from this group, it may just be a legal way that he's dealt with in the past.
Sure.
It could be sorted into our ordinances that we have present.
That's right. There's a lot of things in our ordinances that folks can get away with that are a little unnerving. There's nothing in our ordinances that tie back to the state water runoff.
Right, that's one of the, this is
Soil erosion.
probably the reason, this is what started this.
It is, yeah.
So, I mean, we've had a history of, it's led us to this point and continues.
There's a lot of different things in our ordinances that when you really dive in, that are a little unnerving. But we'll continue this conversation. Is there any more appearance and public comments?
Can I just update everybody on 3 of my things, pretty quick? Elmiga's resurfacing is underway, as I know you know.
Yeah.
The 8 trees were taken down, and they milled it and they paved it today. And there's 2 or 3 they're doing tomorrow, and then the big one on Arlington is on Monday. So we're gonna get some notices out tomorrow. Brian is getting all my info today, because that's gonna be the biggest one that's gonna take the most. Go right by, the gym wall is 95% done. They just have to clean up the edges, and it's very nicely done.
And I stopped by there today, and our guys are doing a great job, and out there dying in the heat. So make sure you thank them for it.
And so that's well underway. We'll be pouring a 7-foot walkway back up against the building, and the concrete guy said, there's no way water's getting back in here. Everything that Brian and his guys have done, infrastructure in the wall, the French drain behind there, we'll have to figure out a little safety fence kind of thing, cause it's got an old pipe, a handrail back there. And in the park restroom, our block man is probably 85% done, but in my delivery yesterday, they shorted me 2 pallets of 12-inch block. And that wasn't determined until about 2 o'clock today as they were looking where that other pallet was. So he said he's gonna go on vacation and be back to the job on Tuesday because they can get me the block on Monday. So, and, but the interior walls are probably 8 feet from being all the way up. The plumbers worked there with them because they put and the electricians were there today, so they all were working together to make sure they've got all their pipes and wires and everything run through the wall. So it's been going very nicely. And, thank you for sorry about the confusion of that, but it was great watching everybody's response and how quickly they could respond.
Yes.
And I do agree with the color because it should match what the chief has over there. So yeah, I would go with that for sure. And because here's the process going forward. The trusses should be delivered on Monday the 25th. And as soon as they finish those blocks, there's some joints that will be made, and then Brian and them will deck it and roof it and build the widow's walk. But the actual metal will not be installed until the last day that nobody has to be on that roof again, because it would be flashed and tar papered, because he doesn't want the painter or anybody else to on it except his guys coming off of it. So we got plenty of time. We're good with that. And we're working on the louvers, which was a big expense. Brian and I are gonna meet with that guy locally to make those, because what that is on the ceiling, on the sides of the eaves, is so airflow can come through. They're not gonna close. There's no screen. It's just open air to move the air through that open area as the wind blows. So they're just a decorative piece. And they were $25,000. So we cut that down. So it shouldn't be that bad, because you'll do 2 on each side, because you have the 8-inch block, and then you have the outside brick, and then you have the inside. So there'll be 2 that are installed like this with the space in between there.
Save that money.
Mark, also as a comment, I think possibly the same gentleman that you're gonna meet with for the floor.
Yes.
There's a type of flooring there that seals everything, so we don't have seams or dry out, so it can just be one.
And Brian knows this guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same person.
Is it epoxy is what he was saying?
Right, so instead of having tiles and all this, you just do the whole floor that way, and it seals it all, so you can wash your hands.
And we've got big drains in the bathrooms and in the janitor's closet to better wash anything out. The last thing of color we'll have to do is pick the trim and the doors, and there'll be hardy plank around the widow's walk up top. So that's the only real thing of color that we'll have left to do.
And for the louvers, you're going to Piedmont metal?
I think that's where he said we're going.
Yeah,
So you'll have that, and you'll have that color to go on there too.
Right, and the floor?
Yes.
Piedmont metal?
Okay.
That'll be the floor.
You were supposed to be going sometime tomorrow.
Okay, that's good.
So that was my update.
All right, and there is one thing that we need to go into executive session about, if I can have y'all for 8 minutes.
Real estate.
Real estate. Can we entertain a motion to go into executive session?